Echoes of the unseen. The air was thick with the scent of scorched stone and lingering magic as Kaida and her squad retreated to the ridge. Their steps were careful, their weapons still drawn, scanning the battlefield below. The Crimson Warriors had ceased pursuit, instead scouring the ruins like silent sentinels, searching for something unseen. Kaida held the obsidian shard tightly, its unnatural pulse thrumming against her palm. It felt aware, as though it recognized what had just transpired and was waiting, watching. She exhaled slowly, shoving that thought aside. "We need to regroup," Soren said, his voice strained but composed. "The fortress isn't far. If they aren't pursuing, we should get back and assess our next steps." Darian grunted, wiping sweat from his brow. "Next steps? More like figuring out what the hell that thing is." His gaze flickered toward the shard. "Because if they wanted it that badly, we sure as hell shouldn't be holding it without knowing what it does." Kaida nodded, gripping the shard tighter. "Agreed, but we're not discussing it here. We need to get back to the fortress and..." A sudden tremor rocked the ridge beneath them, cutting her off. Dust and loose debris tumbled from the cliffside as an unnatural, resonating hum filled the air. Kaida's eyes snapped toward the ruins below, where the Crimson Warriors had gathered in a perfect, unmoving formation. Then, as if answering some unheard signal, they turned in unison and began to march away, vanishing into the shadows beyond the broken walls. "That's new," Leora murmured, stepping beside Kaida. "They never retreat. Not like that." Ray frowned, eyes narrowing. It wasn't a retreat, that was a withdrawal, strategic, purposeful. Kaida clenched her jaw. They hadn't given up, they had gotten what they wanted. Or more disturbingly, they had decided that the Voidborn weren't a threat worth finishing off. Either way, it left an unsettling taste in her mouth. "Move out," she ordered. "We get back to the fortress, reinforce defenses, and find out exactly what this shard is before we're too late." The Voidborn fortress had become a hive of activity upon their return. Word of the Crimson Warriors' attack had spread, and a fresh layer of unease settled over every soldier and mage within its walls. Repairs were already underway, with fortifications reinforced and watch patrols doubled. Kaida wasted no time. She had barely stepped inside before heading straight to the war room, her squad trailing behind her. "The archivists are waiting," Soren informed her as they moved through the dimly lit corridors. "If anyone knows what this shard is, it's them." They entered the chamber to find several robed figures hunched over scattered tomes and scrolls, their eyes flickering between ancient texts and hastily drawn diagrams of the shard. At the center of the room, a raised stone table held a containment ward, shimmering softly with layers of protective magic. An elderly archivist, her face lined with the weight of centuries of knowledge, peered at Kaida with sharp, calculating eyes. "You have something ancient in your possession, Commander. Something that was never meant to be found." Kaida placed the shard on the table, watching as the protective ward flared in response. "What is it?" she asked. "And why did the Crimson Warriors want it?" The archivist exhaled slowly, running her fingers across the surface of an open manuscript. "We have only legends," she admitted, "but they speak of the Heart of Oblivion, a relic of such power that it was shattered and sealed away in separate pieces, hidden across the world. Each fragment is said to hold the ability to unravel existence itself." A heavy silence settled over the room. Darian broke it first. "Oh, fantastic, so we're holding on to a literal doomsday device." Kaida's expression darkened. "If this is just one piece, how many others are there?" The archivist shook her head. "No one knows. The records of the Voidborn's past are fractured, lost to time and war. But if the Crimson Warriors are searching for the Heart's fragments, it means something has set them into motion." Rai leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "And if they're gathering the pieces, they must have a purpose." "Or a master," Soren added grimly. Kaida exhaled sharply, pushing back the growing sense of unease. "Then we need to stop them before they get their hands on another piece." The archivist hesitated. "Be warned, Commander. The shard you carry, it will draw things to you, entities that seek it, That need it. You may not have a choice in when or where you fight next. Kaida met her gaze unwavering. We'll be ready. As the Voidborn prepared their next move, shadows stirred in the far reaches of the land. In an unknown citadel, far from mortal eyes, figures clad in ancient flowing robes gathered before a monolithic structure pulsating with an eerie crimson light. The tallest among them, a being with eyes like burning coals, raised a hand to the relic embedded in the altar. The first piece has been found, the voice echoed through the chamber, reverberating like a whisper of the void itself. A second figure stepped forward, armored in blackened steel, their voice a guttural rasp. Then the hunt begins. The chamber darkened as unseen forces shifted, moving at the will of something far older than history itself. The Crimson Warriors were only the beginning. The fortress was alive with restless energy. Soldiers sharpened weapons, spellcasters reinforced wards, and the murmur of tense conversations filled the stone halls. The knowledge that they now held a piece of something ancient, something the Crimson Warriors sought with unrelenting precision, had changed everything. Kaida stood at the fortress's high balcony, her eyes scanning the horizon. The obsidian shard rested in a reinforced lockbox behind layers of containment spells, yet she could still feel its presence, a faint whisper at the edge of her mind. It was waiting. She turned as footsteps echoed behind her. Soren approached, his expression sharp with thought. "I've cross-referenced the archivist's records with Voidborn military logs," he said, handing her a parchment marked with hastily written notes. "There are mentions of 2 more suspected locations where artifacts of Voidborn origin were sealed away. Both predate the fortress itself." Kaida scanned the document. "Are we certain these sites still exist?" Rai entered the balcony from the opposite side, tossing a rolled-up map onto the table. "They do, but neither is unguarded," he said. "One is buried deep in the ashen wastes, controlled by an independent faction that doesn't take kindly to outsiders. The other, somewhere beneath the ruins of Ebonreach, now overrun with wraiths." Darian scoffed. Of course, it couldn't be something simple, like a nice abandoned temple with a welcoming sign. Kaida smirked faintly, but quickly turned serious. "The Crimson Warriors haven't attacked in 2 days. That means they're planning something. If we wait too long, they'll get to these locations first." Soren nodded. "Then we need to split our forces, 2 teams, each heading for one of the sites." Kaida frowned, considering the risks. "We can't afford to leave the fortress undefended. If they strike while we're gone..." "They won't," Leora interrupted, emerging from the shadows. "I've arranged a diversion." Kaida raised an eyebrow. "What kind of diversion?" Leora smirked. "One that'll keep them busy. Let's just say certain rumors are making their way across the region. False leads, whispers of a 3rd artifact in lands far beyond here. Even if they suspect deception, they can't ignore the possibility." Kaida exhaled slowly. "That buys us time." She turned to her squad. "All right, we split up. Soren, you take Leora and half the squad to Ebonreach. Darian, Rai, and I will take the Ashen Wastes. We recover both artifacts, regroup, and then figure out how to keep them out of the wrong hands." Darian clapped his hands together. "Sounds like a plan. When do we leave?" Kaida's gaze flicked to the darkening sky. "At dawn." The next morning, Kaida, Darian, Ray, and their team rode across the cracked, scorched earth of the Ashen Wastes. The landscape was lifeless, a barren stretch of charred ruins and jagged rock formations. Darian tugged at his scarf, shielding his face from the wind-blown ash. "I hate this place. Feels like the land itself is cursed." "It is," Rai muttered. "The Ashen Wastes were once a thriving kingdom, then someone unleashed something they couldn't control. Now it's just death and echoes." Kaida remained silent, keeping her senses sharp. The deeper they traveled, the heavier the air became. The shard, locked in a reinforced container strapped to her back, pulsed intermittently, faint but insistent. "They're coming," she murmured. Ray tensed, his hand drifting toward his blades. "How many?" Kaida's eyes flickered with recognition. Not the Crimson Warriors, something else. From the blackened sands ahead, twisted figures began to rise. Gaunt, hollow-eyed beings, their skin stretched tight over elongated bones, emerged from the dust. Their movements were unnatural, as if time itself had forgotten them. Darien cursed under his breath. Ashen revenants, and a lot of them. Rai exhaled slowly, his stance shifting into readiness. We go loud, then. Kaida readied her staff, shadows curling around its edge. We go fast, cut through them, and keep moving. The first revenant lunged, its skeletal fingers clawing for Kaida's throat. She twisted, her staff slicing through the creature's midsection. It collapsed, only for two more to take its place. Darien roared as he charged forward, his greatsword cleaving through revenants like dry branches. Rai moved like a shadow, weaving between the creatures, striking with surgical precision. Kaida's magic surged through her veins as she channeled dark energy into her strikes. Tendrils of shadow erupted around her, ensnaring revenants and pulling them into the void. But the horde was endless. We're wasting time, Ray called out, slicing through another revenant. They're stalling us! Kaida realized he was right. The revenants weren't attacking to kill. They were holding them in place. Her grip tightened around her weapon. Then we break through now! She raised her hand, magic surging as she unleashed a shockwave of shadow, scattering the revenants in all directions. Move! The team surged forward, cutting through the remaining undead with sheer force. Beyond the battlefield, the entrance to an ancient, crumbling temple loomed ahead. Kaida could feel it, the presence of another shard. They had found the right place. But something else had found them first. The temple doors swung open with a thunderous boom, and from the darkness within, a pair of glowing red eyes stared back at them. A crimson warrior stood in the temple's shadowed doorway, motionless, waiting. And then it stepped forward. Meanwhile, Soren and Leora's team approached the ruins of the once great city, its towering remains now draped in eerie mist. The echoes of the past whispered through the shattered streets, but something else stirred beneath the surface. Something waiting. Leora exhaled. This place is wrong. Soren nodded. Then let's get what we came for, before it notices us. The hunt had begun.